these different mechanics. Okay. But any other questions or difficulties that arose while working on the whole thing?
I mean, it was not difficult, it's just I needed more time to finish because I didn't finish.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was not difficult because I mean, it's easy when you use already established game or already established mechanics like we are using. But to develop your own, I think it's much harder.
Yes, it is. Like when you think, oh, that's a good idea, how can I make it usable, viable?
Yeah.
And I make, okay, that's maybe a bit too much. I need to like turn it down. Okay, I turn it down way low. I need to increase it, so it's like balancing.
You ran into that thing we talked about. Could you show us what you encountered?
I put in the input, wrote the move objects.
Where?
It was the MS. That's Tetris one. That one, yes. And I put rotate object. It needs to be rotate objects and move them left to right. And I put making objects move faster by holding them.
Yeah. So, and what happens to me very often is, and what happens to many students is, they think these two different things as one verb, as being one verb, which you already did. Yes. And I wanted to give you all a heads up. This is a design decision. This is a decision about how you think about your game rules. As soon as you decide, well, I'm treating these two inputs as one verb, maybe you will get away with it, maybe it's a good idea, but maybe you will run into a problem because lack of precision. So this is possible, and the problem will occur later when you try to explain a programmer how you want your game to be implemented. Yeah, and you can imagine this on the other side. If you're not precise enough when talking to a game artist, you will run into other problems, but
I mean, technically speaking, rotating objects can be one action, moving the object from left to right can be second action, and making object go faster, that may make it a third action.
Yeah, for example.
And I just put it in like a one sentence.
And a programmer will typically ask you to be precise about this, because they will have to implement different actions for this. Yes. They will have to implement different code for each.
Yeah, and then how much you want to do, like 90, 60, or like 100.
Yeah.
And then needs to be precise.
So this is what I meant before when I said about getting closer and getting farther out. So another thing about Tetris, and I'm talking about Tetris because I guess most of you know this. Matching is, when you look at it like that, is merely a goal in my opinion, and I would maybe have called it moving blocks, or and the difficult thing, and you chose Tetris, which is a very abstract game.
Yes.
Tetris basically has no narrative at all. It's just building blocks. Where you could, with very, very much imagination, you could imagine a story like, yeah, we are building the Russian Kremlin, for example, because of the music and building blocks and so on, and we have to manage resources. But this is really, you have to let it very strong.
I was also like moving, but that's not the point of the game. Is to match the object, to increase your score as maximum as possible, to have the most space on the board as possible. Yeah. So if you move it, yes, I can put, like, for example, 2 cubes and I'll leave empty space. Yes, that's technically moving, but I'm not removing from the board. So that's how I was thinking, like matching, probably, because I need to match shapes to put under like Legos to be put together to like remove the more space from it.
Yeah, and I would answer to you. You have described a goal here.
Yes.
And you have described a challenge here.
Yes.
So these are all parts of that verb. This is why this is such a useful term, I think, because it can cover very much, but you also need to think that it has to cover that much. So you're right about everything you said.
Yes, but it's like 3 different things.
It's different things. And the tricky thing about game goals and game verbs is that they very often seem or sound even similar. So, but another lesson for game design is not to confuse a goal with a verb, because you can a verb may be constituous in you can fail at a verb, and at a goal, well, you cannot reach a goal, but the goal is there. It's a static thing, more or less. A verb is something you can actually influence. Remember, at the beginning of our class, I talked about quizzes where there's only one real answer, one true answer.
So meaning can be probably not moving, but manipulating the.
Connecting? Like
And that also like manipulating the object, because you're moving from left to right, rotating, and connecting them. So manipulating the object.
Yeah. And this is the point at which I would suggest. So let's make two verbs from this.
Yes, so that would be matching and manipulating, like I said.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But it's really good that we got to this point, because only in this way this problem will become clear. So, or this challenge will become clear about designing games. And when it comes to teaching with game mechanics, you will need to be aware of this, because the next step would be what would we learn. What is it that we actually learn when we play Tetris, where we could learn something about how space is being managed. We could learn something about estimating speed.
Yes,
space management, hand-eye coordination, for example, dealing with high speed, and so maybe even thinking into the future, maybe even estimating when will the fitting building block reoccur, which is the pattern.
That's why I put like a new rule section in equality, because in an older style Tetris you don't have colors, you have 4 colors. And I put like what, for example, if we, for like one row, you match all colors, you get extra point for it. Because because you're thinking in advance, oh, what if I say, for example, yellow, the 4 yellow objects, I combine them and I get extra points. So that would also be like, future thinking, like future proofing.
Yeah, and this would have other consequences too, because if you introduce a rule like this into your game, so that Tetris would be sensitive to colors, you would have to increase your game space a lot. And you would have to change the algorithm in which the blocks occur, and so on. So this would have really big effects on the whole gameplay thing, which can be handy, and it could even mean, well, you don't have to pay you don't have to pay anything for the creators of Tetris when you create your own game, because it's different enough.
It's different enough,
to be a game on its own. So on the legal side of things, on the artistic side of things too, of course, because balancing a game like this would be completely different than the balance of Tetris.
For example, there's a game called Sandris, because it's such a Tetris, it's a shape, but when it falls, it becomes sand. And it's really similar-ish.
Yeah. And if you look at that vast amount of smartphone and handheld games that are about matching similar things, Candy Crush games and then Diamond games and whatever. These basically all the same principle, but with little differences, and it feels differently, even though it's so similar. Okay. Any other things that you observed that you'd like to address? No. Okay. So we'll get to the third part. We talked about input and output, and we talked about being able to fail at the verb. And what I explained in the abstract, I'm trying to make a bit more concrete now. These are 3 different implementations of one verb, which is kick a ball. So this is all a game that claims, these 3 games are all games that claim to be football, or soccer, if you will. Nevertheless, this is the manifest way of implementing the verb, like really kicking the ball. The simulated way and the represented way. I talked about representation before. I described simulation here as some parts of the action are being simulated while other parts are represented. So we're going back to that first thought. So in the manifest example, real kicking, and here what kicking means, and we come to meaning now, depends on the context. Imagine the offside rule, for example. Imagine when the game is being stopped. Imagine, I have more, imagine the foul advantage rule. So kicking a ball can mean very different things here in different contexts. Yeah. Even though it's always this or this or however you do. It's real action, and as I said before, you can all apply the framework I introduced to you before on this. When we look at the simulated way, the game is called tip kick. How many of you have played this before?
Yes.
One? No.
What is that?
It's not even anything like football.
Okay, please explain it to everyone. How does the game work?
It's basically a table of football which have like small figurines, and you're playing a player, and you like
control.
You see that small thing.
You see the small thing on the head. If you focus on this, kick the ball.
Yeah, I played it before. Yeah.
A ball like really small, and that's the base that they are on, and like you need to move like tactically.
Yeah, you become more technical, but even though when kicking the ball in this game, some parts of kicking the ball are being simulated, like real world physics, and there's a ball thing, and there's a goal thing, and you have to position your player in order to kick it. But it's not as fast-paced as real football.
Yes.
Of course, because you have to place these. It becomes more tactical, as you said. So when still the ball is being kicked, yet in different movement. And I said that is so. The challenge here is tactical, and it's about dexterities of your fingers, not so much about dexterities of the legs. When playing this game, you train different things. Because there is, well, the manifest thing is a real thing. Simulation just extracts part of the real thing. And if we now go further to the wholly represented game, this is a strategic football game where you don't kick a ball at all. You just throw dice to determine if a shooting was successful or if it wasn't successful. Rolling dice is complete representation of the whole thing. So what you train here is not actually kicking, but successful kicking is simulated by dice. It's a matter of probability. Dice rolling in a certain context can mean kicking, yet dice rolling in another context can mean something else. For example, which is my starting position? Or it could mean how long will the game take, or will my player be injured, or so on, so on, so on. So what I mean, and what I'm aiming at here is, which means you choose which medium you will choose for representation or simulation will have a big impact on how the game will feel and what will be trained when playing the game. Like this, physical fitness, your fingers dexterity, your estimation of probabilities. All with the verb shoot a ball, or kick a ball. Shoot. Can be seen here. I'm just going over this shortly. We have the same thing in digital representation. So here the verb is aim and shoot. But if you do it like this on the arcade, if you do it like this in a first-person shooter game, or if you do it like this in a strategic game, it really depends on the amount of representation and simulation. So simulation is what will make you work as a designer, what will make it difficult for you, what will be challenging for you, because simulation is what you put the real effort in. And this whole genre, which is very popular, will train certain things, and there's lots of discussions going on about in how far this will bring people onto getting used to this positive, so getting used to this perspective, shooting at other people. And so I won't go into this whole discussion, but it's a huge discussion. And many generations of designers have worked to make this perspective in this genre so successful. What it trains here is a political issue. What we learn is in this game here is a political issue. Here, not so much, as it is more abstract. I'm narrowing down on this, not only to explain why simulation is only parts of the whole thing, but also in order to get to my first point, get back to my first point, which is how do we learn? How do we learn easily? How do we learn quickly? And in military training, of course, you do learn how to learn quickly in certain circumstances. There's even quota for this, how quick you will react, how quick you will shoot, and so on. Okay. So, I'm trying to make a short pit stop here and recall. So we talked about verb components. As a game designer, you should ask which components constitute the verb. How could they be fun? So we did a bit of analysis before. We talked about simulation, and I would recommend, as a rule of thumb, simulate the things that are fun and abstract or automate the non-fun components. Example, take a verb like heal, healing. So typically, healing from an injury takes a lot of time, it's very painful, you're in the hospital, takes weeks. In a computer game, this is automated. You click a button. You spend some money on medication. This is one example of how abstraction works and how automation works. Would be interesting to see a healing simulator. I haven't seen one before, but could be a design challenge to create one. How could a good, interesting healing simulator look like? And this is where serious games and game mechanics with a purpose become difficult, because this would be a really useful serious game. Teaching people how to heal well could be interesting. So, third aspect, what makes verb execution a success or a failure? You mentioned this, what is the quality of a successful verb, and which is it? How will the game measure and segment this? So, these are the theoretical ideas about this, and what I'm going to do with you, if you want me to. This is an if. We can try to do this hands-on for the next half-hour model of the interplay of these different mechanics. Okay. But any other questions or difficulties that arose while working on the whole thing?
I mean, it was not difficult, it's just I needed more time to finish, because I didn't finish.